Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode in the series Conversations with Shelley. I am Shelley for those of you joining me for the first time. Welcome. For those of you who've been here with me for some time now, welcome back. Always a pleasure to have you. Always thanking you for being here and for always supporting this little humble channel. Now, this time around, I want to add yet again to the conversation because I believe it has taken another turn. And of course, it is indeed something to talk about because there are times when we talk about things to get it, you know, moving in the right way. And there's sometimes we talk about things to allow a change to happen and to see if we can reverse, you know, something that has potentially gone too far. And I'm hoping this is what can happen in what I'm now considering to be part two of this conversation. What am I talking about? I'm talking about Member of Parliament Nekeisha Burchell and, of course, her recent interview on the fix. And one of my concerns, and something that I want to speak about, and I won't get too personal into what I see potentially happening within the space in relation to this particular matter. Because my intention is always to lift the conversation outside of, where it potentially is at a general level. But I wanted to bring the conversation a little bit higher, just to look at whether or not, we benefit when politics and our politicians step out of the arena and get into personal affairs, things that really should remain within our personal lives and maintain decorum in terms of politics and as I said, in terms of being politicians. So for me, if you watch my previous video on this, I was more concerned about the idea of Patwa being spoken in Parliament. But subsequent to what has happened since, in terms of the Member of Parliament, it has certainly added insult to injury. And while the conversation started with Patwa in Parliament, and that is pretty much where, the intention of my initial discussion was about, as I said, it has somehow, you know, been relegated to a different type of conversation. So it has indeed moved away from identity, um, procedure, rules. It dabbled a little bit into politics, but now it has certainly gone into the realm of being personal. And for most of us, in Jamaica, the debate is something completely different now. It has taken on a color of its own kind. And it begs the question of, did our politics and political commentary become so personal that it has hurt the conversation and has injured many persons who could have benefited in the long run from a more structured and thought through and controlled process. Because once the conversation moved from the house into someone's marriage and into someone um, control of their husband, it is clear that the debate has certainly changed. And this debate surrounding the Member of Parliament and the interview on the podcast and the comments that followed involving the Speaker of the House has certainly sparked a wider national conversation, one that I believe hurt more than it could have. And again, the question is, should political criticisms remain focused on policies and institution rules, regulations, or should we allow our politicians and our public figures to have the flexibility and the leverage, for want of a better word, to extend the conversation and the discussion and the rhetoric into personal and family dynamics? Well, today, the conversation is one that I will explore. I'll explore the politics, um, public responsibility, certainly gender expectations, and where the line should be drawn. And I will hope at the end of it that we can see the damage done. And for those who are personally involved, they can, you know, at least start the process of remedy the situation. So again, I ask the question, should political figures separate politics from personal life? And this is one of the biggest questions that I think we have been asking in this space. Because certainly, at no point in time do I believe that public officials should enter into conversations surrounding somebody's spouse. So for me, the answer is a resounding no. That should never happen. And there should be some amount of accountability and decency that needs to commence at some point in time and should allow us to know, within our own selves when we audit ourselves where the line should be drawn. So I guess one of the questions that I want to ask is, would society be comfortable? Would Jamaica be comfortable in, a male politician telling another male politician to control your wife? Would that seem normal to any one of us, or would it be accepted? Or would we have an immediate pushback and say, why is the wife even being considered, or why is there a conversation surrounding the wife? And of course, we would have ensured that we understand that the wife operates within our own person. So I believe it should be no different here when a public official steps outside of the arena of politics and steps into a personal family dynamic. Certainly, we should be just as outraged at how inappropriate and unacceptable this behavior is. And the truth about it for me is that it also steps into a little bit of a wider discussion outside of just whether or not politics should commingle with personal affairs. Because it also speaks to a matter of a gender discussion. And I know a lot of persons within the space have also touched on it. Certainly, I have, heard other persons mention, you know, the idea of women, um, women in leadership, and what does that mean in this day and age, and the fact that we have worked so hard as a female species to get where we want to be, that we should always, no matter what part of the aisle we sit, we should certainly, as much as possible, support and embrace women in leadership, because this is something that it has taken us quite some time to get here, and we don't add to the movement by what has recently taken place. So this may be one of the most important part of the entire discussion for me, certainly, because while we understand the politics and the personalities and the personal dynamics and family relationship that got dragged into the conversation and shifted the entire discourse, it may for me also raise an issue of gender expectation, as I said, more likely so women in leadership. Meaning, what should we expect from our leaders when they are women and they are women with power? And for me, I was very disappointed. I was very disappointed in the member of parliament stepping out of the arena of politics into the personal affairs and personal relationship of the Speaker of the House. Because when a woman in leadership gets a platform as enormous as the one that the member of parliament has, it is always the right thing to do to show up and do the work of representation of politics. But for some of us, it's hard for us to manage that kind of power. And that is why we have been without it for so many years. Because some of us just can't manage the role and responsibility that comes with such an opportunity. And instead of showing up and doing the job, we take the opportunity to perform. And that is where it becomes sad for me. So I just want to add that certainly I was very disappointed from the point of view of how does a politician think it right, think it appropriate to step outside of the arena of politics and just lay so low to go into the realm of somebody's personal affairs, and albeit another politician. And not to say that politicians are above, you know, general people, but certainly there's a level of expectation that should allow us to rise above, you know, this kind of behavior. So that for me was the first sticking point. And of course, the second one was women in leadership and what that should have meant to us, to the individual who, has suddenly gotten herself into this viral discussion. And I hope some atonement is made. I hope guidance is given. And I hope the necessary steps are taken to, as I said, remedy this great, you know, I always want to give people grace, human frailty. Because as I said, there are bigger issues, you know, that arise here. And certainly it is not benefiting anybody at all when we allow our politics to become personal. Because at all point in time when that happens, the original message will automatically disappear. And what could have been certainly a benefit to Jamaica and to the people and the constituent and to the representation ended up being about something completely and utterly inappropriate. And at the end of the day, for me, the real losers aren't the ones that are, you know, affected directly by what is taking place. The real losers are the people who ought to be represented. So for me, in closing, I will say, with as much big sister advice that I can give, that the interview that the Member of Parliament engaged in recently certainly did not help. It hurt the message even more so than the intended and initial message. So for me, this was a moment where we only added insult to injury. And if I could offer any guidance, as I said, from one big sister to another, I would say sit within the silence of your actions, sit within the silence of your soul, sit within the silence of what you know to be right, and do the right thing. And that's where I leave that for now. Thank you always for sticking and staying and for joining, and always welcome the comments. Always hope that you would like, share, and of course, subscribe. And until I see you next, please take care of yourselves and each other.